The sound of Martin's footsteps echoed through the house, growing louder as he approached. My heart raced, knowing that this conversation would change everything. "Amelia." Martin's voice was unnaturally calm as he entered the room. "We need to talk." I turned to face him, forcing a smile. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, his eyes darting around the room before finally settling on me. "I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hip bumping against the counter. "What? Why?" Martin ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd seen countless times over our years together. "I'm in love with someone else. Her name is Lily." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Lily? Who's Lily?" She's someone I met at work," Martin said, his voice growing stronger. "We've been seeing each other for a while now." The room spun around me as I tried to process this information. How long had this been going on? How could I have missed the signs? How long? I managed to choke out. Martin looked away. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies and deception. I thought back to all the late nights at the office, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden interest in his appearance. It all made sense now. "Does your mother know?" I asked, thinking of Carol, Martin's overbearing mother who lived with us. He shook his head. "No one knows. I wanted to tell you first." I laughed bitterly. "How considerate of you." Just then we heard the front door open. Carol's voice rang out. "Martin? Amelia? We're home." Martin's eyes widened in panic. "Please don't say anything to them yet. Let me handle it." I nodded numbly, still in shock. As Carol and Robert, Martin's father, entered the kitchen, I plastered on a fake smile. "Welcome back," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. "How was your trip to the store?" Carol bustled in, arms full of grocery bags. "Oh, it was dreadful. The lines were so long, and they were out of my favorite brand of tea. But never mind that. What's going on here? You two look like you've seen a ghost." I glanced at Martin, who was doing his best to appear normal. "Nothing, Mom," he said. "We were just discussing dinner plans." Robert, always the quiet one, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He began unpacking the groceries, his movements slow and deliberate. As Carol prattled on about her shopping woes, I felt a surge of anger rising within me. How dare Martin drop this bombshell, and then expect me to act as if nothing had happened? How could he betray me like this? I cleared my throat, interrupting Carol mid-sentence. "Actually, there is something we need to discuss." Martin's head snapped up, his eyes pleading with me to stay quiet. But I was done keeping secrets. "Martin has just informed me that he wants a divorce," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "He's in love with another woman." The kitchen fell silent. Carol's mouth hung open in shock, while Robert froze, a can of soup still in his hand. Martin looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Is this true?" Carol finally sputtered, turning to her son. Martin nodded slowly. "Yes, Mom. I'm sorry, but it's true." As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was just the beginning, I realized. The life I had known was crumbling around me, but from the ashes, something new would rise. And I would make sure that everyone involved felt the pain they had caused me. Little did they know, their comfortable world was about to be turned upside down. And I would be the one to do it. The days following Martin's bombshell announcement were a blur of tension and awkward silences. I found myself retreating to the guest room, unable to bear sleeping next to the man who had betrayed me so thoroughly. But even that small refuge was about to be taken away. "Amelia, dear," Carol's shrill voice called from downstairs. "Could you come down here for a moment?" I sighed, steeling myself for whatever new drama awaited me. As I descended the stairs, I saw Carol and Robert standing in the living room, surrounded by suitcases. "What's going on?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Carol beamed at me. "Well, given the current situation, Robert and I thought it would be best if we moved in for a while, to help smooth things over." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Move in? But where will you stay? We don't have the space. Oh, don't worry about that. Carol waved her hand dismissively. We'll take the guest room. You can sleep on the couch for now. It's only temporary after all. I opened my mouth to protest, but Martin appeared behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder. It's for the best, Amelia. Just until we figure things out. I shrugged off his touch, anger bubbling up inside me. Figure things out? You mean until you leave me for your mistress? Carol gasped. Amelia, there's no need for such language. We're all family here. Are we? I snapped, because it seems to me that family doesn't betray each other like this. Robert, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all take a moment to calm down. This is a difficult situation for everyone. I turned to him, noticing for the first time how uncomfortable he looked. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of guilt? I filed that observation away for later. Fine, I said, my voice cold. You can have the guest room. I'll sleep on the couch. As I stormed off to gather my things, I heard Carol's voice behind me. Oh, and Amelia? Be a dear and make up the guest room for us, won't you? The next few days were a nightmare. Carol took over the kitchen, criticizing my cooking and rearranging my carefully organized cupboards. Robert spent most of his time in the den, engrossed in his phone and barely speaking to anyone. And Martin acted as if nothing had changed, going to work each day and coming home late, always with some flimsy excuse. One evening, as I was folding laundry in the living room, I overheard a heated conversation between Carol and Robert in the kitchen. You need to be more careful, Carol hissed. Amelia's not stupid. She's going to figure it out if you keep acting so suspiciously. I don't know what you're talking about, Robert replied, his voice low and defensive. Don't play dumb with me, Carol snapped. I know all about your little indiscretions. And if I found out, it's only a matter of time before others do too. I froze, my mind racing. What was Carol talking about? What secrets was Robert hiding? Just then Martin walked in, catching me eavesdropping. What are you doing? He asked, his eyes narrowing. I straightened up, meeting his gaze defiantly. I could ask you the same thing. How's Lily, by the way? Does she know you're still living with your wife? Martin's face darkened. That's none of your business. Oh, I think it is, I retorted. This is still my house after all. And I'm starting to think there are a lot of secrets being kept under this roof. As if on cue, Carol bustled in, her face a mask of forced cheerfulness. Dinner's ready, everyone. Amelia, be a dear and set the table, won't you? I looked around at the faces of my so-called family, Martin's guilt, Carol's false smile, Robert's shifty eyes. In that moment, I knew that things couldn't continue like this. Something had to give, and soon. Little did they know, I was already formulating a plan that would expose all their secrets and turn their comfortable little world upside down. They had no idea what was coming. I couldn't sleep. The couch was lumpy, and my mind was racing with questions about Robert's indiscretions that Carol had mentioned. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a decision. I needed answers, and I knew just where to look. Quietly, I crept up the stairs and into the guest room where Carol and Robert were sleeping. Their soft snores filled the air as I tiptoed to Robert's briefcase, carefully unzipping it. My heart pounded as I rifled through the papers inside. Bills, work documents, nothing out of the ordinary. Then, tucked in a side pocket, I found it, a small black notebook. I slipped out of the room and down to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I opened the notebook. What I saw made my blood run cold. Dates, times, and initials. LM over and over again. And next to each entry, a hotel name. Oh my God, I whispered, realization dawning. LM Lily Martin. My husband's mistress. Just then, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I quickly shoved the notebook into my pocket and pretended to be making coffee. Good morning, Amelia, Robert said, his voice gruff with sleep. You're up early. I turned to face him, struggling to keep my expression neutral. Couldn't sleep. Coffee. He nodded, and I could feel his eyes on me as I poured him a cup. Did he suspect I knew? As I handed him the mug, our fingers brushed, and I had to suppress a shudder. "Everything all right?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Fine," I lied. "Just thinking about the divorce." Robert's face softened. "Ah, yes. It's a difficult time for everyone. But sometimes these things happen for a reason." I stared at him, anger bubbling up inside me. "A reason? You mean like your son falling in love with another woman?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes. Sometimes people grow apart. It's nobody's fault. Isn't it?" I snapped, because from where I'm standing, it seems like there's plenty of blame to go around. Just then, Carol bustled into the kitchen. "Good morning, dears." "Oh, Amelia, you look dreadful. Didn't you sleep well on the couch?" I gritted my teeth. "No, Carol, I didn't. But I'm sure you and Robert slept just fine in my bed." Carol's eyes widened. "Now, Amelia, there's no need for that tone. We're all trying to make the best of a difficult situation." I laughed bitterly. "Are we? Because it seems to me like some people are doing just fine." Robert cleared his throat. "I think I'll go get dressed." He hurried out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with Carol. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "What's gotten into you this morning?" I met her gaze, my voice low and dangerous. "I know, Carol. I know about Robert's little indiscretions. And I know you know too." The color drained from Carol's face. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I pulled out the notebook. "Then what's this?" Carol lunged for the notebook, but I held it out of reach. "Does Martin know?" I asked. "Does he know that his father has been seeing Lily too?" Carol's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You can't tell him. It would destroy him." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Destroy him? What about me, Carol? What about what your son and husband have done to me?" Just then, Martin walked into the kitchen, his hair mussed from sleep. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. I turned to him, the notebook clutched in my hand. "Oh, Martin, you're just in time. Your mother and I were just discussing some very interesting family secrets." Martin's eyes widened as he saw the notebook. "Where did you get that?" I smiled, a cold, dangerous smile. "From your father's briefcase. Would you like to know what's inside?" As Martin reached for the notebook, I knew that the moment of truth had arrived. The carefully constructed lies of this family were about to come crashing down, and I would be the one to light the match. Martin snatched the notebook from my hand, his face contorting with anger and confusion as he flipped through the pages. "What is this? Where did you get it?" I stood my ground, my voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around me. "Your father's briefcase. It seems he's been keeping quite a few secrets." Carol stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Martin, dear, let me explain dash." "Explain what?" Martin roared, his eyes wild as he looked between his mother and me. "That my father has been seeing Lily too? Is that what this is?" The kitchen fell silent, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Robert appeared in the doorway, his face ashen. "Son, I can explain dash." Martin whirled on his father, his voice low and dangerous. "Explain? You want to explain how you've been sleeping with the woman I love? How long has this been going on?" I watched the scene unfold, a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow washing over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when all their lies came crashing down. But the pain in Martin's eyes, the betrayal etched across his face, it was almost too much to bear. "I think," I said quietly, "that we all need to sit down and have a long talk." The next hour was a blur of accusations, tears, and revelations. Martin paced the living room like a caged animal, alternating between rage and despair. Carol sat on the couch, her head in her hands, while Robert stood by the window, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "How could you do this to me?" Martin asked his father, his voice breaking. "To Mom, to our family." Robert's shoulders sagged. "I never meant for it to happen. Lily. She was just so young, so full of life. I got caught up in it all. And you knew." Martin turned to his mother. "You knew and you said nothing?" Carol looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "I thought I could fix it. I thought if we came here, spent some time together as a family, everything would work itself out." I laughed bitterly. "Some family we are. Built on lies and betrayal." Martin turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "And you? How long have you known about this?" I met his gaze steadily. "I only found out this morning. But I've suspected for a while that something wasn't right." He nodded slowly, then turned back to his parents. "I want you both out of this house. Now." Carol gasped. "But Martin Dash." "No." He cut her off. "I can't even look at either of you right now. Just go." As Carol and Robert gathered their things, the weight of everything that had happened settled over me. I watched Martin, the man I had loved for so long, crumble before my eyes. Despite everything he had done to me, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Once his parents were gone, Martin collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. "What am I supposed to do now?" he whispered. I sat down beside him, careful to maintain some distance. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I do know that we can't go on like this." He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "I'm so sorry, Amelia. For everything. I never meant to hurt you like this." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "I know. But the truth is, Martin, our marriage was over long before Lily came into the picture. We both know that." He nodded slowly. "So what now?" I stood up, suddenly feeling more clear-headed than I had in weeks. "Now we move forward. Separately. I think it's time we both started being honest with ourselves and each other." As I walked out of the room, leaving Martin to his thoughts, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The life I had known was gone, shattered beyond repair. But from the ashes of this destruction, I could see the faint glimmer of something new on the horizon. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The days following the revelation about Robert and Lily were a blur of tense silences and awkward encounters. Martin had retreated into himself, spending most of his time locked away in his home office. I found myself wandering the empty rooms of our house, feeling like a ghost in my own life. One morning, as I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cold cup of coffee, Martin appeared in the doorway. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a week's worth of stubble on his chin. "Amelia," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk about the divorce." I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. "All right, let's talk." He sat down across from me, his hands fidgeting on the table. "I've been thinking, maybe we should wait a bit before finalizing everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Wait? Why?" Martin sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "My parents. They're devastated. Mom keeps calling, begging for a chance to explain. And there's the family reunion coming up in a few weeks. I just thought, maybe we could wait until after that. Keep up appearances one last time." I felt a surge of anger rise within me. Keep up appearances? After everything that's happened? "Please, Amelia," Martin pleaded. "It would mean a lot to my family. And to me." I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of the man I had once loved. But all I saw was a stranger, worn down by lies and betrayal. In that moment, something inside me snapped. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "We'll wait until after the family reunion. But after that, I want you out of this house." Martin nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, Amelia. I promise after the reunion, we'll sort everything out." As he left the kitchen, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The wheels in my mind began to turn, a plan forming that would shake the very foundations of this family that had caused me so much pain. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparations for the family reunion. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, planned an elaborate menu, and even bought new outfits for the occasion. To anyone watching, I must have seemed like the perfect, dutiful wife. But beneath the surface, I was plotting. Each night, after Martin had gone to bed, I would sit at the kitchen table with a notepad, meticulously planning my revenge. I made lists of everything in the house, researched moving companies, and even started looking at apartments in a nearby city. One evening, as I was finalizing my plans, I heard a knock at the front door. Curious, I went to answer it, only to find Lily standing on our doorstep. "Amelia," she said, her voice trembling. I need to talk to you." I stared at her, shock and anger warring within me. "I think you've done enough talking," I spat. Lily flinched but stood her ground. "Please, it's important. It's about Martin and Robert." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let her in. As we sat in the living room, Lily's words tumbled out in a rush of tears and apologies. She told me about how Robert had pursued her, how Martin had found out and confronted his father, and how the whole affair had spiraled out of control. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Lily sobbed. I didn't know what to do." I listened in stunned silence, my mind reeling from this new information. When Lily finally left, I sat alone in the darkened living room, my carefully laid plans suddenly seeming inadequate in the face of such betrayal. In that moment, I made a decision. The family reunion wouldn't just be an end to my marriage. It would be the stage for my ultimate revenge. I would expose every lie, every betrayal, and watch as this house of cards came tumbling down around them. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, a grim smile played on my lips. They had no idea what was coming, but soon, very soon, they would all pay for what they had done. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. I woke before dawn, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. Today was the day I would tear down the facade of this family once and for all. Martin had left early for a business meeting, and Carol and Robert were out running errands for the upcoming family reunion. The house was eerily quiet as I made my final preparations. I'd spent weeks planning this moment, meticulously organizing every detail. The moving company would arrive at 9 a.m. sharp. I had exactly 4 hours to execute my plan. With trembling hands, I dialed the number I'd memorized. "Hello, is this Speedy Movers?" "Yes, I'm calling to confirm the appointment for today." As I hung up, a wave of determination washed over me. There was no turning back now. I started in the bedroom, methodically packing away my clothes and personal belongings. Each item I placed in a box felt like shedding a layer of my old life. When I came across our wedding photo, I hesitated for a moment before placing it face down in the trash. The sound of a truck pulling up outside jolted me from my thoughts. I glanced at the clock, 8:55 a.m. They were early. "Mrs. Thompson?" A burly man in a uniform stood at the door. "We're here for the move." I nodded, ushering them inside. "Yes, thank you for coming. Everything needs to go." The movers looked confused. "Everything? Are you sure?" "Absolutely everything," I confirmed, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. For the next few hours, I watched as our life together was dismantled piece by piece. The couch where we'd spent countless evenings. The dining table where we'd shared meals and laughter. The bed where our love had once flourished and then withered. As the last box was loaded onto the truck, I stood in the empty living room, my footsteps echoing off the bare walls. The house felt hollow, a perfect reflection of my heart. Just then my phone buzzed. A text from Martin. "Meeting ran long. Be home in an hour. Can't wait to see you." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Oh, he was in for quite a surprise. With one last look around, I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. But as I reached for the handle, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart stopped. It was too early. They weren't supposed to be back yet. Through the window, I saw Carol and Robert getting out of their car, arms full of grocery bags. They were laughing about something, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. I had a split-second decision to make. I could slip out the back door, avoiding confrontation and leaving them to discover the empty house on their own. Or I could stay and face the music, watching as their world crumbled around them. As Carol's key turned in the lock, I made my choice. I straightened my spine and took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The door swung open, and Carol's cheerful voice called out, "Amelia, dear, we're back early." I hope you don't mind, but we picked up some extra. Her voice trailed off as she stepped into the barren entryway. The grocery bags slipped from her arms, cans rolling across the hardwood floor. Amelia! Robert's confused voice came from behind her. What's going on? I met their shocked gazes with a steely determination. Welcome home, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I think it's time we had a little family meeting, don't you? As Carol's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, and Robert's face turned an alarming shade of red, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The storm was about to break, and I was ready to weather it. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of their nightmare. And I, Amelia Thompson, would be the architect of their downfall. The silence in the empty house was deafening. Carol and Robert stood frozen in the doorway, their eyes darting around the barren living room in disbelief. I watched their faces, savoring every moment of their shock and confusion. Amelia, Carol finally managed to sputter. What have you done? I smiled coldly. I've simply removed everything that doesn't belong to me. Isn't that what happens in a divorce, Carol? Robert stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. You can't just dash. Can't what, Robert? I interrupted. Can't take what's rightfully mine? Can't expose the truth about this family's lies and deceit? Just then, we heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Martin was home. Perfect timing, I muttered, my heart racing with anticipation. The front door swung open, and Martin walked in, his eyes widening as he took in the scene before him. What the hell is going on here? I turned to face my soon-to-be ex-husband, feeling a surge of power coursing through me. Welcome home, darling. I thought it was time for a little redecorating. Martin's face contorted with rage. Have you lost your mind? Where's all our stuff? Gone, I said simply. Just like our marriage. Carol stepped between us, her voice shrill with panic. Now let's all calm down. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for all of this. I laughed bitterly. Oh, there certainly is. Why don't you start by explaining to Martin why his father has been seeing Lily behind his back? The room fell silent. Martin's face drained of color as he turned to look at his father. What is she talking about? Robert's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Carol let out a strangled sob. That's right, I continued, my voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around me. Your father has been having an affair with Lily for months, and your mother knew all about it. Martin stumbled backward, his back hitting the wall. No, that can't be true. I pulled out Robert's black notebook, the one I'd found weeks ago. It's all right here, Martin. Dates, times, hotel names. Your father and your lover, meeting behind your back. Robert lunged for the notebook, but I held it out of reach. You want to deny it, Robert? Go ahead. Tell your son the truth. The room erupted into chaos. Martin was shouting at his father, Carol was pleading with everyone to calm down, and Robert was desperately trying to explain himself. I stood in the middle of it all, watching as the family I had once been a part of tore itself apart. Suddenly, the front door burst open once again. Lily stood there, her eyes wide with panic. Martin, I can explain, dash. The room fell silent once more. Martin turned to face Lily, his voice barely above a whisper. You and my father? Lily's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Martin. I never meant for any of this to happen. I watched as Martin's world crumbled around him. The man who had betrayed me, who had shattered my heart and my trust, was now experiencing the same pain he had inflicted on me. As the accusations and explanations flew around the room, I felt a strange sense of detachment. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed their lies, torn down their carefully constructed facade. But as I looked at the broken people around me, I realized that my revenge hadn't brought me the satisfaction I had hoped for. In that moment, standing in the empty house filled with shattered dreams and broken promises, I made a decision. It was time to walk away from all of this, to leave behind the pain and the betrayal and start anew. With one last look at the chaos I had unleashed, I picked up my suitcase and walked out the front door. As I stepped into the warm sunlight, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The old Amelia was gone, left behind in that empty house with the remnants of a life I no longer wanted. It was time to write a new chapter, one that belonged to me and me alone. As I stepped out of the taxi in front of my new apartment building, I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. It had been 3 months since I'd walked out of that empty house, leaving behind the shattered remains of my old life. The memory of that day still burned bright in my mind, but the pain had dulled to a distant ache. I fumbled with my keys, struggling to balance my groceries and open the front door. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out behind me. "Amelia!" I froze, my heart pounding. Slowly, I turned to face Martin. He looked older, more worn than I remembered. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant, almost sheepish demeanor. "Martin," I said, my voice steady. "What are you doing here?" He shifted uncomfortably. I've been trying to find you, to apologize, to explain." I sighed, feeling a mix of emotions wash over me. "I don't think there's anything left to explain, Martin. Please," he pleaded, "just give me 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I nodded. We sat on a nearby bench, the groceries forgotten at our feet. Martin took a deep breath. "After you left, everything fell apart. Dad moved out, Mom's a mess. Lily, well, she's gone too. I realized how much damage I'd caused, how many lives I'd ruined with my selfishness." I listened silently, surprised by the lack of anger I felt. Instead, there was only a deep, profound sadness for the life we'd lost. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Martin continued. "I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know how sorry I am. For everything." I really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man I'd loved, the man who'd broken my heart, seemed small and defeated. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "But the truth is, Martin, I've moved on. I had to survive." He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I understand. I hope you're happy, Amelia. You deserve that." As I watched him walk away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The last ties to my old life were finally severed. Back in my apartment, I unpacked my groceries, my mind whirling with thoughts. The confrontation with Martin had stirred up memories I'd tried to bury, but it had also reinforced how far I'd come. I looked around my small but cozy apartment, filled with items I'd chosen for myself. On the wall hung a painting I'd started in the art class I'd joined. My laptop sat open on the desk, displaying the draft of the novel I'd finally found the courage to write. This was my life now, a life built on my own terms, free from the lies and betrayals of the past. As I settled onto my sofa with a cup of tea, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my new friend, Sarah, inviting me to a book club meeting. I smiled, realizing how much my world had expanded since I'd left that empty house behind. I thought back to the woman I'd been just a few months ago, consumed by anger and the desire for revenge. That Amelia seemed like a stranger now. In her place was a woman who had faced her worst fears, confronted painful truths, and emerged stronger for it. My revenge hadn't brought me the satisfaction I'd hoped for. Instead, true liberation had come from walking away, from choosing myself over the toxic relationships that had defined me for so long. As the sun set outside my window, casting a warm glow over my new home, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited about the future. Amelia Thompson, was finally free. Free to love, free to live, free to be exactly who I wanted to be. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. With a contented sigh, I picked up my novel draft and began to write. My story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. And this time, I would be the author of my own happy ending.